Yo, yo, yo. What is up, Hivers? It's another 90s Friday. Today's date, I believe, is the 29th, if I'm not mistaken. Hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving here in the USA. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of 5-tune Fridays. Just kind of picking 5 favorite tunes, plus a couple bonus jams. Sometimes from the same band. We did the Beastie Boys. We did 9 Inch Nails. Well, that was for 3-Tune Tuesday, but you get the gist. So I wanted to do something different and focus on one album instead of kind of going all over the place. We're going to be talking about the band MXPX and the album Life in General. The song playing when you first clicked is the song Middle Name, the opening track. Robot or your slave, go! Very, very, very similar vibe to kind of like the poppier punk stuff. You know, the SoCal, like Blink-182, you know, before they were huge. Definitely that kind of vibe. You know, they grew up listening to the band The Descendants. Basically the same influences as Blink-182. This is literally one of the albums I grew up on. I got it when I was in middle school. Probably got it like a year after it came out or 6 months after it came out. It came out this month. I believe it came out November 19th. So we're celebrating the 30th anniversary of Life in General from the band MXPX. I think probably their most influential album. They definitely put out, you know, some hit or misses. The follow-up definitely was not bad, although it was the worst album cover of all time. But I'll talk about that some other time. So MXPX, a little background here. If you're familiar with the band, go ahead and fast forward 2 minutes. But basically, MXPX came out of Bremerton, Washington. They were formed in high school. They got signed to a label named Tooth and Nail Records, which gave them a horrible deal. It was a 5-album deal. They were 17 when they signed. So obviously their parents had to sign for them. And they didn't get their own lawyer. It was just a terrible deal. It might have been that they did a 3-album deal, but then they immediately after re-upped and they were like 18 and it was just a bad deal. The distribution was not bad. You know, the first 2 albums did okay. You know, but they were definitely separate from like the regular punk scene. If they had signed to Epitaph Records, which is the label that, you know, put The Offspring on the map, Rancid, independent label, but just, you know, it's almost like MXPX was like in a separate world. And even after having some success in a separate area, they just, you know, kind of had to almost start over. You know, they sold like 100,000 albums, I think the first 2. 1994's Pokin' At Ya, which came out when they were seniors in high school, and then they recorded the follow-up during spring break senior year, and it came out that summer, 1995. So this was the first album, Life in General, album number 3. This was the first album that they recorded, you know, post being in high school. They wrote most of it post high school. And it's just a great record. Now, the backstory, they actually recorded it with the same producer that did Teenage Politics, their prior album. And you could hear those demos on the B-side compilation, Let It Happen. Definitely some good songs, but the production was just not very good. And even the label agreed, and they went and got the guy that did all the Epitaph records, Steve Krovac, who had, you know, just was well known for working with a lot of the SoCal bands. They actually recorded the album a second time. Whoa, sorry, I almost dropped my phone. They actually recorded it a second time, and it came out much better. And there were a lot of songs left on the cutting room floor. They basically had enough material for 2 records. The album has 17 tracks. I think looking back, it would have been better to like honestly cut it down to like 13 or 14 tracks, put out like another album of like all the mediocre songs, just to get out of the record deal and get it over with, and then release this on either a major label or on Epitaph Records. Because what kind of happened to MXPX, they signed to A&M Records off this album, meaning for the next album. But during their touring cycle for Life in General, they let the lawyers deal with it. They hated the label, and rightfully so. They had a horrible record deal. Tooth and Nail Records has sabotaged them by putting out like just stuff that was not meant to be put out, like B-side stuff. The same time they were promoting their follow-up, their first major label album, Slowly Going the Way of the Buffalo, which was the album after Life in General. Literally, their old label put out a B-side compilation with 33 songs, sold it for $7.99. So, obviously everyone's going to buy that if they're not familiar with the band and they don't know it's like demos and stuff. I mean, obviously you're going to be like, oh, 33 songs for $8. Why would I buy this album for $14.99? But despite all that, the album spoke for itself. It really was kind of like being their first album in a weird way. Because they really got rediscovered by the real punk scene after kind of being in the separate Seattle area thing. And the album's great. If you're not a fan of pop punk, you probably won't like it. But to me, honestly, this album, Blink-182 got a lot of influence from this album. This came out in 96, a year before Dude Ranch from Blink-182. At least like 9 months before, but it was definitely recorded well before. And to me, these guys should have been bigger than... They should have been huge. They should have been as big as The Offspring. The single Chick Magnet actually got some rotation on MTV in 97, even though they were on a tiny indie label. They were just that good, It really wasn't... It was a very different song. It's a song that I can't stand because it's kind of cheesy. But, they just tried to do something different and, thought it'd be a fun single. The song Chick Magnet, I'll put that as a bonus jam. Again, it's not my favorite, but it is their biggest single, so might as well put it down there. As well as the song Doing Time, which I think is a great song. The only criticism, it's less than 2 minutes long, so it's hard to be a radio single if it's only like 1 minute and 30 seconds long. If I was in charge of the band, I would have done a few things very different. But that just goes to show, when the magic happens, the magic happens. Nothing's perfect. I think the song Middle Name should have been a single. These guys literally perfected the SoCal pop punk sound a year before Blink-182 and Damn It blew up and all that stuff. And I think if they were on even a better independent label, they would have been huge. They would have been top 40, rock radio. But I think they had so much working against them, it hurt them. But they still got some MTV play. They were still on a couple shows. They were played on 120 Minutes a lot. I remember going to see a movie. I don't remember which one. And the movie Dead Man on Campus, the MTV movie, it had Mark Paul Gosselaar and that guy that was the drummer in That Thing You Do. Dead Man on Campus. And the song Doing Time was actually in the background of the trailer. And I was like, oh my gosh. When you really like something and no one else has really heard of it for the most part, usually with a band or something like that. And then all of a sudden, you see them pop up somewhere random. It's a pretty wild feeling. It's pretty cool. But yeah, some of the single choices I would have revisited. But hey, what are you going to do? I think that MXPX, the reason that they didn't blow up commercially, I honestly believe if this album came out on Epitaph Records or a major label, and they had the backing of the label promoting the hell out of it, I think this album would be as big as Blink-182 1999. Or at least a better comparison is probably Blink-182 with Dude Ranch, the album that had Damn It on it. Where it was like all over rock radio, but they weren't the pop sensations they were 2 years later when Enema of the State came out. I just think they really got a bad deal with the record label. And then, just to give you a little foreshadowing, when they finally record the follow-up and release it in 1998, A&M Records, their major label debut record label, gets bought out by Interscope, merges with Polygram, blah, 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 Geffen, Interscope. And basically, all their A&R people got fired. And even though they had an album out, they got no promotion. And the worst part of it is they didn't even get dropped. The label was like, no, you guys are good. We're going to keep you. And then they did the same thing for the 2000 album. 2 albums later, they literally made one music video and then stopped promoting the record. And it happened again in 2003. So this 1998 to 2003 period where all this pop punk stuff is blowing up, the label just screwed them over. And the worst part of it is 2001, 2002, there were no albums released. That's literally when bands like Good Charlotte, Sum 41, Simple Plan, all these Blink-182 style bands were all over MTV, all over the radio. And MXPX really took a beating in terms of what I think their success would have been because of these bad record deals. And I think even if they were on a good independent label, they would have gotten like a lot of MTV play to a much higher extent than they did. So this album really should be, I think, should be up there with The Offspring Smash in 1994, Green Day Dookie 1994, Blink-182 Dude Ranch, or Enema of the State. I just think it's like this album that should have been much more well-known that just isn't. And in a weird way, that kind of gives it a little more, you want to stand up for it. You want to like really go out of your way to support it and love it because it's kind of like, a lot of people aren't familiar with it. My top songs would have to be the opening track, Middle Name. Track 2, My Mom Still Cleans My Room. I'll go with something different. Track 6, Move to Bremerton, which they did record a music video for, which was never released. And then their record label released it for their B-side album when they had a different version on it. And they used the version from this album. It's so confusing and just, if they were just on a good record label, the story would have been so different. But anyway, that'll be my third song I'm going to share with you guys, Move to Bremerton. Then I'm going to go the song Today Is in My Way, track 11. And then I'm going to go Doing Time, track 13. I'm going to pick those as my 5 favorites. And then for the bonus jam, I'm going to show you the single Chick Magnet, which, again, was like it was on MTV in 97. It got some play. And just because their label wasn't very strong and a lot of it was kind of confusing, they really didn't have a big follow-up single like they should have. And I just think it could have been really different. The timing was ripe. 97, you still had Green Day and The Offspring on people's minds. You had Blink coming out with Damn It, that single blew up. MXPX should have been a part of that. And they get the respect now from a lot of their peers, but back then they got no respect. No respect, man. No respect. Just like Rodney Dangerfield says, no respect at all. And it's a shame. It's a shame. If you're not a pop punker, if you're not familiar with this kind of music, you'll probably think a lot of the songs sound the same. But to me, this is one of the... if I had to list the 50 most influential albums of the 90s, this would be on the list 100%. Not just punk rock albums, but just albums in general. This would definitely be on the list. I think this album is just as important, as bringing people into punk as The Offspring or Blink-182. It just didn't get the commercial mainstream success it should have. That's my opinion, It is what it is. But yeah, great album. Again, their next album should have had a big single too. And A&M Records just stopped promoting them. And just didn't put the money behind it. It's the most cruel thing ever. Like, if you're going to do that, drop the band so they can sign to another label. If they had gotten dropped in 99, whether they went to Epitaph Records, which is like the biggest independent punk label, or whether they went to Columbia or another major label, I think this would be a band that you guys would all remember from Top 40 Radio. And it just never was. But this album, in my opinion, is just one of the best. And, they should be a name that's kind of spoken of when people talk 90s, rock radio, punk bands that broke through. I think MXPX belongs with Green Day, The Offspring, Blink-182. That's my honest opinion. But just as a kid listening to this record, I think some of the catchiest pop punk tunes. And I hope you enjoy. I love you guys. Later.